So, just to go over the homework, there's a lot of parts to this collection, and actually last class, I'm pretty sure with you guys, I forgot to talk about one of the parts. Back corner, you with me, guys? Okay. So there are, you're supposed to make 3 floral prints, and they are each supposed to be in 3 distinct styles. So I think that's the part I forgot to talk about with you guys last week. So one of your prints is supposed to be realistic, one is supposed to be artistic, and one is supposed to be abstract. I'm going to come back to what those mean in a second. Other parts of the homework is one print should be a ditzy. Remember we talked about what ditzies looked like, which are these like really tight floral textures, okay? One print should be a 12-inch tile and one print should be a 24-inch tile. So as part of my review, I'm kind of going to make those aspects. Remember last class I showed you guys a video of the roller printers, right? You remember, kind of, and it's kind of like a mesmerizing video or whatever. But those printers are the reason why we have these limits, right? Because if you were designing a pattern and you knew it had to be on a roller, then you have very limited widths because the rollers are standard sizes, okay? They're like 12 inches and 24 inches circumference. And so in order for, right, if this was a 12-inch pattern I designed, it's going to get wrapped perfectly seamlessly around a 12-inch roll. And then this pattern, you know, is what's seamless and like rolls over the fabric. So that's why we have that limitation in this particular assignment. It's realistic to the industry. Does that make sense? Why we're limiting you and how it relates to printer rollers? All right, I'm getting some nods. Cool. Okay. Yeah, and then it breaks down what a ditzy is a little bit more. You have a couple other requirements, which is that that one print must be non-directional. What does non-directional mean? Yeah. Exactly. You should be able to turn it upside down or 90 degrees or 45 degrees, and it should look good from all of those directions. And then you're going to create 3 colorways of each print. That should be pretty standard. And then create a palette, which you maybe did on your mood boards already. Okay, so let's break down realistic versus artistic versus abstract. This is kind of what I am getting the vibe of from those words. So for the realistic one, I literally traced a picture of a rose. For the artistic one, I went, much more abstract, but I think that, like, I went very basic, but I think that there is, like, there's like a gradient between my realistic drawing and my artistic drawing, where your artistic drawing could certainly be a little bit more realistic than mine right here, okay? And then we have the abstract drawing, which is very simplified. It could probably even be simplified more than this, honestly. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So do the 3 have to like go together?
I think it's a big challenge, this project, because they should still feel like a collection, and I agree that that's a challenge. I do think it's possible by using similar color, similar line weight, right, similar drawing techniques, that we can kind of make a uniform collection, but I am also, I don't know, like, I'm willing to accept that this is a hard challenge, so if one of them feels, a little bit outside of the collection, I think there's room for that in a collection sometimes, is like differences. What I think that this requirement is really supposed to mitigate is one person spending, 20 hours drawing realistic flowers and doing all of their patterns with super hyper realistic flowers, and then one person just doing abstract florals and maybe, you know, only spending 20 minutes drawing each of their flowers, or less, you know, 5 minutes, right? So I think it's just supposed to kind of even the playing field a little bit for everyone in the class. So hopefully you can kind of figure out how to make them look the same, look like part of the same collection. We have looked at collections before, like that Midnight Sky collection we looked at a while ago. Twilight Hour, that's what it's actually called, where this collection, although it like feels, you know, like it's based on celestial bodies in the sky, all these patterns don't look the same, but they're part of the same collection. Okay? We actually do have kind of like a painterly floral in here, and then we have kind of a more, I don't know if I would call it scientific, but a more like finely rendered version of the sky. And then this would maybe be considered like a really abstract floral, like super small scale there. So, okay. I want to make these into our required patterns for today. So I have a few requirements. One of them has to be a ditzy, so one of them is going to be really small. One of them has to be 12 inches in height, really, I think, 12 inches in height, and one of them has to be what is the last thing? Non-directional. Okay. Let me start with the ditzy. I guess I'm going to use this realistic one to make the ditzy. And the ditzy does not have to be the 12-inch wide one. I think it's going to be a lot easier to make the ditzy if it's only, you know, a few inches wide, because we'll just be able to like cram them all in there. I've only drawn one flower for each of these, which isn't going to make for the most dynamic patterns. Forgive me. So I'm going to draw a little square. This is only 4 inches wide. And let's give it a background for right now. And I'll start kind of placing my florals on it. Maybe it shouldn't be a square, more like a rectangle. So I will group this and start trying to fit them in there. Okay, so I think that my ditzy is also going to be my tossed or my non-directional design, just to make things easier. So I am going to start placing these really close together and like facing all different directions in order to make my non-directional design. Oops. So I don't want to spend a ton of time here because I want to go over some Photoshop stuff today too. Okay. So let's decide if it's going to be a half drop or a straight repeat, and actually we will make our background square some nice numbers. So we'll make it 5 by 4. And I'm going to refer to the cheat sheet just to keep kind of reinforcing how it works, I guess. We have, I guess let's make it a Yeah, let's make it a brick. Okay, so with a brick by row, anything that's on the bottom row gets moved diagonally across. And we know that motifs that touch the bottom edges, they get copied across the full height and then 1/2 the width. And these are like the X and Y coordinates. And maybe I even should have put like H, comma, 1/2 W, and those would have been in math words, and I'm sorry, I'm not a math teacher, but it's not getting, you're not like adding these together or anything, but you guys have, I think, have been figuring it out, so this is kind of just a review. So this piece is, it doesn't seem like it's touching the halfway point. I'm kind of guesstimating, but I don't think it is, and that's a lot easier when they are not touching the very center of the design, because then you should only have to copy them once, right? If they're on the center of the design like this, or if they're on the corner of the design, you're going to have to copy them more than once for it to be a true seamless repeat. Okay, and we can, am I still not on the center? Move it over a little bit. You can go to Object, Transform, Move. Zero them both out and turn on preview. And now we can move it the full height, which was 4 inches. And it's always good to have preview checked because the negatives and positives in Illustrator are confusing. And then horizontal, it should be -2.5, I believe. Yep. And then we're going to hit copy because we need both of them there to be seamless, right? If I grab this and copy it and like line it up halfway with my background, right? This is how a brick or a brick by row would line up, right? So it's seamless over there. So same thing for this guy. +2.5. Okay, and then the sides, anything that's touching the sides in a brick by row, because the sides line up like perfectly, they aren't offset like they are on the top. So anything on the left or right just gets moved directly across the full H, or the full width, sorry. So that's 5 and 0. So this now would be seamless, but we have to tell it that it needs a bounding box before we do, or a clipping mask, right? And we tell it that by putting an invisible box as the farthest back thing in the stack. So we can go to edit copy, edit paste in back. If we really want to be sure it's the last in the stack, we can go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And we just have to make sure it has Ghostbusters in both these symbols over here. And then Object, Pattern, Make with everything selected. And right now it doesn't line up because we need to tell it it's a brick by row. And things do line up perfectly. A couple of you have run into this and asked me, how do I fix this? Right now, my upper layer is like going over these roses, and when I'm gonna hit cancel for a second. Out here, they aren't going over, right? The stems aren't going over here. And when I define it as a pattern, okay, oh yeah, here we go. They are going over. So that's just your overlap settings. You should be able to fix that just by playing with these overlap settings. So that fixed that one. Now the bottom is in the front or whatever. Same with that. That fixed that one. So now like the right-hand side is in the front. So just playing with these, it should work. So we can hit done. And fill with pattern. Okay. Artistic, let's make this a 12-inch high repeat, and then we'll make the abstract the really large one. So we can, I'm going to work off the artboard for a second. I'm going to work down here, and I'm just going to click with my rectangle tool, and I'm going to make something that's 12 inches high. And then the width doesn't really matter as much because the width could be, you know, any length on the roller, or it could be cut off by the edge of the roller, right? That wouldn't matter. So it can be any amount, but we will make it 16. I guess we'll make it a rectangle shape. And this is going to be our background, so we don't need any pattern or any stroke on it. Okay. So let's get our motif in here, and there's room in the 12-inch world for these to be quite large. Oops. No. So I'm just going to do something pretty simple here just to keep the class moving. I want to see, I'm just going to try defining this as a straight repeat. I'm not going to go nuts here. Like, I like how this looks. I feel like if we leave just a tiny amount of space on each side of the motifs here, then we don't even technically need to do that clipping mask where we copy and paste the pattern to the back, because this all fits inside my little cube or square. So there can be one of our 12-inch patterns, and we can experiment. Do we like it's like a half drop? No. It's nice to make simple patterns. Like, I do appreciate the effort that goes into more complicated patterns, and I think that you should be practicing making more complicated patterns, but I don't think that every one of your patterns has to be complex. Come on. Okay, so we've made this one. Let's actually move this artboard over for a second and talk about how we would make the second artboard for this pattern, right? This pattern is designed at 12 inches, so you should be designing with that end in mind, and you should be displaying it with that end in mind. So in your main colorway, you want to display it at full scale, but we need to see it in a smaller scale. Otherwise, we cannot evaluate the repeat, right? Okay, so I know I said, I've told you guys the bird story with my grandmother. You guys are like, please don't tell the bird story again. But there could be birds in this pattern. We don't know. We need to see the whole repeat. So I drew my two new rectangles. I would apply colorways to them. Maybe I'll make the colorways super quick. We can just select everything and give it a spin around the color wheel and hit save a copy. you would spend more time thinking about what you had done. I accidentally deleted that guy. That's why it's always good to hang on to the artwork that you used to define the original pattern, because like you might mess stuff up. So we have this one, and then I'm going to draw one rectangle, and this is also going to make a seamless pattern the way I'm doing it right now. I'm going to draw one rectangle, and I'm going to draw the next rectangle. I draw them one right after the other, and then I apply my colorways to them. And they are still seamless. And then we select them both at the same time, and we go Object, Transform, Scale. We have to uncheck Transform Objects, and then we will be able to scale freely. So for the 12 and the 24, you need to show them at a smaller scale, but your main scale should be designed to be at 12 inches. There's really no way for me to check that you are working at 12 inches, but it really should be, you should be thinking of it that way, that this is going to be 12 inches high. This is an 11 by 17 board, so we actually can see the whole height of like the 12-inch thing. So I guess I would be able to kind of eyeball that one a little bit at that scale. But then we need to be able to see the smaller scale. And this is not your ditzy, right? We don't actually have to make it that small. We could make it a little bit bigger. We just need to be able to see the repeats. So it might be nice to keep it not as small as your ditzy, right? A little bit bigger, so that we can just enough so that we can like diagnose how the repeat looks. Okay, your abstract is going to be, well, actually, it doesn't matter. You could mix all of these up between realistic and abstract, but my abstract is going to be 24 inches tall for if there were a 24-inch circumference roller, right? So we need a height of 24 inches, and we will just we'll make it a skinny guy, I guess. And let's make sure that has, come on. Okay, so you can see that's really big. That's bigger than the page we're displaying it on, which is why it's vital that we do see a smaller scale of it. But it is also vital that we see the scale that it's intended to be at, because otherwise we won't be able to evaluate like the detail level at that scale. So you need both. Group. Really quick, I could make some more motifs really quickly with this guy by using the, what is it called? The shape builder tool, right? So if I want another flower super quick, I can draw like an ellipse on top of this flower, make sure it has fill in it, and then I can use my shaper tool, and I can subtract, gotta have everything selected before I grab my shaper tool. I can hold Alt with it and subtract this section. So now we have maybe a more interesting flower. So the abstract section might be a good opportunity for you to practice the shaper tool. That was just a little bit of shaper tool review, honestly. I'll send this to the back. All right, not a big fan of this abstract pattern I'm making so far, but So there's always ways, I just want to touch on ways that I might get like a more compact pattern going, especially where this is so large and I have so much space to fill up. I'm going to select everything except the background actually and go to Objects, Pattern, Make. And this is going to just bring my motifs in here, and I'm going to use this as a drafting tool. We've talked about this before. So sometimes I use pattern making as a drafting tool. So I've brought this in here with no background, and we're going to copy and paste it out of here at the end. This isn't my final pattern. But what I can do is tell it that the height should be 24 inches. And then I can play with the width, and I can play with the type of pattern I want, and I can play with my motifs and get them into spaces that I want, all before I really do any of that work of copying and pasting and making sure that it is going to be a nice seamless pattern. So let's make some of these bigger, and let's make some of them smaller. Does it make sense why I'm in pattern design right now without a background in here? All right, I'm gonna then copy. Maybe I like how this is laid out now. Maybe I like it a little bit better than it looked before, and now I know that I want a brick by column. I can add new motifs in here. I could draw in here with the pen tool, but as soon as I like how it looks, I'm going to select everything and copy it. And I'm going to remember the width 9.875. So we've copied it, and now I'm going to hit cancel because I don't really need that stuff anymore. And now this background, I am going to make sure that it is 9.875 inches wide and 24 inches tall, and then we can paste our pattern onto it. And we know that this was a half drop, so we have some copying and pasting to do. If the half drop, anything that's touching the left or right edge gets copied diagonally across with like the full width and the 1/2 of the height. So you can actually do a certain amount of adjusting so that it's easier, right? I can make sure all of these just go off the left. So now I only have to copy left to right, and I never have to copy right to left. So that's probably on the halfway line, so I'm probably going to have to copy these again, but let's see how it goes. So object transform scale, oops, object transform move. So it's 1/2 the height, which is 12 inches. And 9.875. So I'm just doing all of my moving. Is this making sense to you guys? Like, are there any questions you have? Is this even helpful? I'm going to go into a little bit of a new lecture. This has all been review. You feeling good about making your patterns? Yes, Kelsey. Okay. It's weird that one. These aren't lining up in the same spot. What have I done? Ah. I'm having, these like aren't lining up. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. I can finish that later on though, and you guys feel okay about this project? You understand all of the parts? Okay, I don't know why I'm struggling. I am going to move on to making seamless repeats in Photoshop. Okay. I'm going to record it in a separate lecture. I don't know